This is Chris Cameron, and thanks a lot for coming to our Reveal conference. In this breakout session, we'll be going through our Achieving Greater Supply Chain Visibility. This is a breakout section that's a companion to the session for DuPont, who was giving the business justification and drivers behind this pilot that was done in 2013. So we'll go forward to the session context slide, and this is the context that DuPont has presented, and this project is called Project Cornerstone, and it's meant to be done and taken as a part of the whole on the end-to-end product tracking and tracing context that DuPont is initiating corporately. So this particular presentation will go a bit deeper on the design principles and the key tools that were used to achieve the goals of the pilot program. So moving on to the next slide, this is an Elemica supply chain operating network. The purpose of here is understanding this is the key component for achieving that visibility. And in the bottom layer under the messaging dashboard, you see a blue layer for the quick link integration. The key to making this happen is a network that's large enough and has validations, whether those are within the network itself as a service or as SQL applications that are nodes within the network, as shown by the Smart Link applications tier and third-party applications tier. But either way, what we're doing is we're taking the message that compose a logistics transaction, specifically the ASN, and then all of your updates from the various carriers and comparing them together so that as enough data is amassed and enough variances on that data are identified, you're able to reach an analytic approach. In the case of this program, DuPont has already purchased Cognos, and they wish to use Cognos. And the driver for this was that Elemica had the network already in place, the Smart Link applications, and could do that at a much more economical fashion than Cognos could, than other IBM tools could do for Cognos. So that's what we're doing here within this pilot project that we did. So moving on, let's look at the model and both from the data point of view and the functional point of view. So your company is DuPont. They have dominant partners in their supply chain. So using the Gartner maturity model, that's stage at number 4, where you use a dominant partner. In this case, it's BDP, and it is APL Logistics. They also have secondary service providers. Underneath that, they'll have their steamship lines, they'll have their drayage company, other truckings, etc. Outside of that network, meaning outside of those providers, dominant partners, and DuPont's point of view, you have Elemica that sat with the global logistics visibility tool that's in the cloud. Now you see when we hit the next one, we bring up the analytics dial. The whole idea is that DuPont has this analytics that's sitting there and needs to get the data from outside in the logistics network into a rationalized database so that then their analytics can work. Clicking it a little further, you've got the data sources outside in that global logistics visibility, and this is what's driving many of the companies, especially in the process industry sector, as we see our clientele moving from people who make goop and big trailer loads or car loads of certain chemicals to being more specialized and producing smaller batches and higher velocity. It also means that they've got to get down to the level of getting handling units within an SAP or an Oracle system and serial batching data that most of the time is not available out there in the supply chain. So we're building the global logistics visibility platform to be able to get the ASN from the shipper, where you can capture that lower level granular data and associate it with the shipment. So then when you match it up to a very sparse type record where a trucker is just sending you a 214 update message, in the GLV, we'll call the platform, the visibility tool, you'll be able to associate that and keep together what details are passed along in the record. So the whole idea is to tie the GLV platform together with the dominant partners and the secondary service providers, and then bring in your tertiary sources and your secondary sources. So secondary sources and tertiary sources may include like the ports. It would be great because if you've ever had that experience, as DuPont has and we've seen with our other clients, the steamship line says, hey, don't know where this is, the rail is supposed to have it. Well, if you're able to also tap into the ports, which we have at Elemica for a couple of our clients, if we're able to tap into ports, you've got validation back and forth between, yes, it's on a through bill of lading on the steamship line, but I can see my data from the delivering trucker that it was in-gated at the IPI for a certain inland point. It was given to the rail. I can see my rail gateways. I can validate it that it was received at the Port of Long Beach, for example, and then I can see it on the vessel. Now you can compare your dominant partners, your secondary service providers, with your second and third tier source data information. So that's what we're really trying to do, because once you do that, and we'll get to these design principles in here on how to build this. Once you do that, then you have a way of moving towards Gartner's maturity level number 5, where you can get to the sense and respond supply chain. So let's move forward. We've covered that one to the some comparative observations that we've seen in Elemica that we put together with DuPont. One of the main things in the comparative observation that we've seen this trend, and this is, you've heard me mention a couple of times, I refer back to the Gartner supply chain model, maturity model, moving from stage 3, 4, and 5. From Elemica, we were first conceived as a network and an automation network, and we were entirely focused on costs. And when we were doing that, we connected a number of partners to our clients, and then they proceeded to use that automation to streamline their logistics and supply chain activities and brought in dominant partners. And now what we see happening is our clients are trying to move up that scale. The problem is, because they've single-threaded through dominant partners at certain key parts of their logistics supply chain, they're having a hard time getting to the demand constraint adaptive supply chain so that they can get to the revenue focus. Because many times we'll hear, well, we don't know, ABC company has that data for us. So that's where the purpose of this is, to stop that excuse to get from stage 4 to stage 5. It's to enable our clients to be able to take ownership of the data, and we'll come back to that concept in a second. The other part that we're seeing is the goal is that they want to achieve the hard cost savings and revenue enhancements. That's the goal of moving up to the level of maturity and to an end-to-end supply chain value. So in order to have that happen, you have to get to efficient reporting and clean data. We're talking 90% clean, and that's where we see a number of our clients really pushing forward to clean up some of that data. And then build in pre-planned signal points so that those same dominant partners, they're always going to be a part of this. We want your supply chain functions because of them. So we want them to know what exactly they need to do at certain points. And that way things move out to be less reactionary, and they seem to be more as an action that are pre-planned for a given set of constraints. What our clients are telling us they're seeing, and that Gartner here has pointed out, is that if you continue to do this, you start to open up the national bank of the supply chain. Inventory savings, that's where a lot of capital is trapped. By moving some of those on hand, reducing the number of days of inventory on hand, their forecasting accuracy increases, because now we've got good data up and down the supply chain to be able to let all those planning tools you bought actually work. So that's where these are some of the major goals, and we've got some others that continue down here, least of which are taking chunks out of your freight spend, because now you're reducing your expedite, and you're looking at workforce. I'll call it aversion as opposed to reduction. So you're using the same people to do more value-add jobs than some folks that we've run into, that you just have a person who calls around all your freight forwarders all day. Not necessarily a good use of their time. So let's look at continuing on into the design principles of this tool. So the design principles are really built on a couple of different columns, if you will, or platforms. The first one is triangulation. So from that platform, you got to build on the triangulation. If you're getting all of your data from one source, you may run into a problem, especially if more than one or two service providers are delivering that particular transit. So in the case of ocean freight, you see this most often. In the case of trucking, that may be just fine because you got a full truckload that's picking up here and moving to there. And it's one truck and you don't expect it to move. But even if it's let's say it's a less than truckload shipment and it crosses regions and they subrogate the carriage to a partner, you may need the data from that partner too, because many times we see purchasing departments choose the lowest cost per X, per pound, per kilo, per whatever. They don't stop to consider that you need the data from the various partners and then to be able to give you the picture of where things are at all times. So that's always a breakdown we see from within the from procuring to functional personnel. So triangulation becomes the first place, so that you can figure out who's not telling you what you need. Number two is validation. So within the network, you have the validation ability to be able to tell a carrier that they have told you the wrong information. Many times people know that. For example, if they send something to you without the waybill number, automatically we know doesn't match your shipment reference number. There's no reason to accept that data. You reject it right there, pushing for correction on it. And then the last one is adjudication. So within the difference between validation and adjudication is once you've done validation and you know your data is good, you're now able to put business rules in it so that if something doesn't happen within a prescribed period, say for example, if you know the sailing time for the vessel was on day one and you have business rules in there that says if I don't get sailing confirmation within 24 hours of day one, then let the network prompt somebody for action. Not just, I didn't get anything, so I don't do anything. That's what most systems do today. That's the difference between validation versus adjudication. Validation says, I didn't get anything, so it's fine. I validated what I did get, and everybody's happy. Adjudication says, I didn't get anything, and I'm supposed to. Let me get that data from you. So let's move forward on the next side to the result of the design in looking at the tool view. So we brought in the tool view. Everything we're doing within the tool view, we're emailing to say, hey, here's something, and what you're seeing in this screen on that result is an actual email that says you got a problem with this shipment and this particular container that's late 7 days given by a certain adjudication principle. In other words, we said, I'm expecting to see this at a certain time. We haven't seen that data to say it's ETA or that it's ATA. So the platform's reaching out to prompt for that input and driving the behavior in the supply chain. As we then move to that next one, you can see here's another area in the design phase. And if you look in that center column under the carrier/3PL reference, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers that are in black while everything else is in blue. Those are indications in the data that we receive shipment updates without receiving the initial ASN, without the booking to start the shipment. So we had a failure from the dominant partner to give the ASN from the very beginning for the platform to be able to measure against. Now, what we're able to do, the way that's found, is then you're getting, instead of getting your ASN from the dominant partner, we received it from one of the carriers at a secondary source, and you still captured it because we're tracking this at the container number level. So we got it from the container number level, put it in there together, and now we're still continue to provide the same amount of data tracking in terms of the gateway because it's a standard, it's set up in the business rules according to governing the ocean freight flow. So that's an idea that you want to have. Earlier I was saying that you want multiple sources of data. This is the way you catches it. It validates it, brings it in, and now we've got an adjudication going on that's saying you got an issue. And that issue is somebody didn't tell you some data along the way. So that's what you're looking for in the result of the tool design. So if we go forward into the next kind of section, so let's talk about the keys. What key tools would you use to build such a such a platform. The first thing that you're going to need to understand is the network is the king. There's so many times we go and visit clients and they just want to see the sexy software. It's got dashboards, it does this, it does that. All that does is give you red, yellow, greens in a very fast way. Doesn't tell you anything fast. The network is the thing that you need the most, because the network has to have those key architecture principles and design principles that we talked about above. It's got to be able to triangulate, validate, and adjudicate. So we've got to be able to bring all of that into the network. Once you get it from the network, then you can use applications. Applications are one way of doing this. They're the slower way, but that's one way of doing it. Where we at Elemica are moving towards and in the process of rolling out over the next 24 months is a web service platform in our network, so that we don't have to run everything through a SQL app and drive up the cost of connecting everybody to a particular app. That's one of the reasons why we haven't gotten here so far. Back when I was a freight forwarder, third-party logistics individual, that's all we did was build apps, and then we had an army of people who kept plugging folks in. And when the SQL database at some point in time experiences a law of diminishing returns, because it gets so large that our customers can't get what they were needing from it. So that's the reason we've chosen at Elemica to move forward with a web service, with a service architecture, so that the network becomes agnostic and scalable. And then your applications can be Elemicas, they can be the shippers, they can be the service providers. It doesn't matter. They just need to enable the traffic and enrich data where it's necessary. So that's what that's your first principle, and one of the tools, I should say, the first tool that you would use to achieve some of those principles. The next thing that we're going to see is it's key to own the data. Back when I was a 3PL, the data visibility was given as a result of handling the freight, which had many of our clients abdicating the ownership of the data and the stewardship of the data. That was just done by us as the 3PL. And then it was expected to send it back to them, but I can't tell you how many Elemica clients we have. If we go ask them, hey, give me your shipment data for a given lane, we are told, hold on a second, I have to call ABC provider, and it's going to take about 2 weeks while someone runs a report. Why is that? Why is that not in your data, in you as the shipper? You're the one who's on the hook for reporting this to the U.S. government anyway. Why is it you can't grab your own data? So the number two principle to building these tools is own the data. There's no single source of logistics data. It's all fragmented, and you have to pull it in together. So you are better served by having multiple data points. And even if you do have single source data, that does not complete the picture. Those dominant partners are absolutely necessary. I want to make sure that from this monologue, we don't take away that, fragment your carrier base. Absolutely not. The whole point is to outsource to strategic partners who work with you, but not to abdicate as the shipper the ownership of the most valuable part of your business, and that is understanding where your material is at any time. If you abdicate that, how will you ever have the Amazon experience? We see that in the best-in-class behavior that leaders tend to, and this is not us, this is the Aberdeen Group, leaders take control of their supply chains. And the one we'd really like to focus on there is they're more than 1.5 times as likely to automate and redirect transit flows based upon the ownership of the data that they see. That's what it allows the leaders to be, by a factor of almost 2 over their competitors, be able to respond to changes in their supply chain. That's tough to do when you don't own the data. When you don't own the data, you have to call and figure out where stuff is. That may be what you have one person somewhere, as I mentioned, or as I met with one of our clients who does that. They just have 1.0 on the Manning scale who watches out and calls freight forwarders to see where things are, and that's the reason why they only have 2 freight forwarders. So that's the second part of building a successful strategy or a successful tool to achieve this strategy. If we go to the third slide here, kind of business rule projection. At the end of the day, all of us live to serve your ERP package. So your SAP system and the way you built it, not just SAP, your Oracle system, your Microsoft Dynamics, and some green screen thing that was built a number of years ago but keeps on churning and doing a good job. It has business rules in it that make your company your company. So you've got to look within the network to find an outside-in commerce engine, someone that can replicate in an economical fashion the necessary part of your business rules, project them into your supply chain, and now that's what you use to do. Remember earlier we talked to triangulate, validate, and adjudicate? That's what allows you to adjudicate, because you now have your business rules outside your enterprise pinging you, telling you have something wrong, rather than, oh wait, I've got to use a standard set of business rules someplace. So that business rule projection, and more importantly, your business rule projection is a huge advantage, and that's something you're looking at to do this thing right. So if we continue on in summary, your design principles are that triangulation, the validation, and adjudication. Your keys to building, the key tools to building this are all about a scalable network, owning the data, and projecting your business rules. If you put these together, and we also want to say this is not a wave your magic wand and it works. If you put these together, you'll be able to start to relatively quickly build a very good global logistics visibility tool that is a value add driver. And ultimately, that's where everybody wants to get. Right now, everybody seems to be searching around trying to find out where their shipment is. The whole idea is you'd like to know where your shipment's going to be, and you would like to know when something is threatening your shipment that you didn't think of. That's what we're all striving for, and that's a bit of a journey. It takes a couple of years to build that kind of intelligence in a way that folks will believe it. Because today, many of our clients that we see already have the tools to do this, and nobody believes them. It's the little boy crying wolf, because no one believes the data going into it. So moving forward, we thank you very much for listening here, and if you have any additional questions on achieving greater supply chain visibility, please do not hesitate to give us a call at Elemica, and we can help you. And if we can't, we'll point you to a direction where we may be able to do that. We thank you very much and look forward to seeing you down the road.